There is a kind of man you have probably never heard of. He does not trend on social media. He does not post his wins. He does not explain himself to rooms full of people who have already decided what he is. He moves through the world quietly, deliberately, like someone who has already seen the ending and chose to show up anyway. Women feel him before he speaks. Men notice him without knowing why. And the women who once walked away from good men, kind men, honest men, men who gave everything they had, those same women find themselves thinking about this man at 2 a.m, staring at the ceiling, wondering what it is about him that they cannot shake. I used to wonder the same thing. But before I tell you what I found, I need to tell you about the man I was before I understood any of this. Because that man is probably sitting exactly where you are right now. I want to tell you about a version of myself I am not proud of. A younger man, driven, ambitious, the kind of man who showed up early and stayed late at work, in relationships, in life. I carried myself like someone who had read all the right books and taken all the right notes. I believe the way you believe something you were never directly taught but somehow absorbed from every movie, every conversation, every well-meaning piece of advice you ever received, that love worked like a ledger. You put in enough. You get enough back. You sacrifice enough. You become impossible to leave. I was wrong. Not slightly wrong. Not wrong in a way that a small correction could fix. I was catastrophically, completely, quietly wrong. And the most painful part is that I was wrong while doing everything that looked right from the outside. I called when I said I would call. I remembered the small things, the coffee order, the difficult anniversary, the name of the friend she mentioned once 6 months ago. I turned down nights out with people I genuinely liked because she had had a hard week and I wanted to be there. I made myself available. Completely. Totally. Like a man who had decided, without ever saying it out loud, that his own needs were an inconvenience to the relationship he was trying to protect. And then she left. Not for someone who treated her better. Not for someone who showed up more consistently, called more often, cared more deeply. She left for a man who, from every angle I could measure, seemed to offer her less. Less time, less effort. Less of everything I'd been carefully, devotedly, exhaustingly giving. I remember the night I found out. I was sitting in my car, engine off, lights off, parked outside my own apartment, unable to go inside, unable to move. Just sitting there in the dark, replaying everything, auditing every sacrifice the way a man checks receipts after he has been robbed. I gave her my time. I gave her my energy. I restructured my entire life around her comfort. Where did it go? That question did not leave me for a long time. And if you have ever sat in that same silence in a car, in a room, in the kind of darkness that has nothing to do with the lights being off, then you already know what I mean. You already know that specific kind of pain. The pain that is not just about losing someone. It is about losing someone after doing everything right. That is the worst kind of loss. Because at least if you had been careless, if you had been distant or selfish or unkind, you would have something to fix. You would have an answer. You would have a direction. But when you gave everything and it still was not enough, that question has no comfortable place to land. Most men carry it quietly for years. Some carry it their whole lives, moving from one relationship to the next, giving the same way, losing the same way, never understanding why the formula keeps failing. I almost became that man. But something happened. Something shifted. And what I discovered on the other side of that shift about women, about attraction, about what high-value men actually understand, that most men never figure out, changed everything. Stay with me. Because what I am about to tell you is not what you have been taught. It is not what the movies showed you. It is not the advice your well-meaning friends gave you when she left. It is the truth underneath all of that. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Comment below right now, have you ever given everything to someone and still lost them? Tell me, you are not alone in this. I want you to think about something for a moment. Think about the last time you really wanted something. Not needed it, not chased it desperately, but genuinely, quietly wanted it the way you want something when you are not sure you can have it. Remember that feeling? That slight tension in your chest, that edge, that awareness that this thing, this moment, this person could slip away if you are not careful. Now think about the last time someone handed you something for free. Something you did not work for, did not earn, did not have to think twice about keeping. How long before you stopped noticing it was there? I am not asking this to make you feel bad. I am asking because the answer to that question is the key to everything you have ever been confused about when it comes to women. Every mixed signal, every slow fade, every I love you but I am not in love with you. Every relationship that started with fire and ended with her looking at you like you were furniture she had forgotten to return. It all lives inside that question. And nobody, not your father, not your friends, not the relationship advice you consumed at one, I'm trying to understand what went wrong. Nobody told you the truth about it. So let me tell you now. Here is what I discovered after I finally stopped auditing her behavior and started examining mine. The woman I lost did not leave because I was not enough. She left because I had made myself too much of one thing and not enough of another. I had made myself endlessly available, and in doing so, I had removed the one thing that makes a woman's heart move toward a man and stay there. The possibility that he might not always be there. Now, before you misread what I just said, stay with me, because this is where most men take a wrong turn and end up colder, more distant, more calculating, and still alone. That is not what I am talking about. I am not talking about games. I am not talking about ignoring her or making her chase you or pretending you do not care. I am talking about something far more fundamental, something that has nothing to do with tactics and everything to do with truth. I am talking about the difference between a man who is present and a man who has disappeared into his presence. Read that again. A man who is present versus a man who has disappeared into his presence. Because that was me. I was physically there always, emotionally available completely, but the man I actually was, the man with opinions that inconvenienced people, the man with ambitions that took up space, the man with a direction that existed before she walked into the room. That man had quietly left the building, and she felt it. Not consciously, not in a way she could have named if you asked her, but somewhere beneath language, beneath logic, beneath every reason she gave herself and gave me, she felt the absence of the man she had first been drawn to. And she spent months reaching for him before she finally accepted he was not coming back. She did not leave me. She left the space where I used to be. Here is the thing that wrecked me when I finally understood it. She was not wrong to leave. That is the part that is hardest to say. The part I resisted for a long time because it was so much easier to carry the story of the good man abandoned by an ungrateful woman. That story was clean. That story made me the hero. But it was not true. The truth was messier and more important. The truth was that I had spent so long trying to become what I thought she needed that I had stopped being what had made her want me in the first place. I had traded the whole man for a perfect partner, and a perfect partner with no self is not a partner. It is a mirror. And you cannot build a life with a mirror. You cannot feel safe with a mirror. You cannot fall deeper in love with a mirror because a mirror only ever shows you yourself. It gives you nothing new, nothing challenging, nothing that makes you feel like you are standing next to someone, rather than just being reflected back at yourself. This is what high-value men understand that most men spend decades missing. She does not want a mirror. She wants a window, a man she can look through and see somewhere she has never been, a man whose world is bigger than the relationship, a man who has things in him she has not yet discovered because he has not stopped discovering them himself. That man is magnetic not because of what he does for her, but because of who he is when she is not watching. And here is where it gets even deeper because I know what some of you are thinking right now. Okay, so I just focus on myself and she comes back? No, that is still the wrong question. And I know it is the wrong question because I asked it myself. I spent 3 months after she left half rebuilding myself and half waiting for her to notice. Half working on my life and half checking my phone. And nothing changed. Because the moment you rebuild yourself as a strategy, the moment self-improvement becomes a performance for an audience of one, it stops working. She can feel the difference between a man who is becoming something and a man who is becoming something at her. The universe, and women, have an extraordinary sensitivity to that distinction. So what actually changes everything? What is the real difference between the man who loses again and again, with different women, in different years, with the same hollow outcome, and the man who never loses? I found out, and it was not what I expected. Before I go further, drop a comment. What is the one thing you wish you had understood sooner about relationships? I read every single one. I need to tell you about a conversation I had with myself at 5 a.m. on a Tuesday. Not with a mentor, not with a friend. With myself in the bathroom mirror of a small apartment that still smelled like the life I had lost. Unshaven. Eyes that had not slept properly in weeks. Looking at a man I barely recognized. And for the first time in months, I did not look away. I stood there, and I asked myself the most honest question I had ever asked in my life. Not why did she leave? Not what did I do wrong? But this, who are you, actually, when nobody is watching? When there is no relationship to hold together, no woman to impress, no version of yourself to perform, who is the man that remains? The silence that followed that question was the loudest thing I have ever heard, because I did not have an answer. And that silence, that terrifying, honest, 5 am silence, was the beginning of everything that changed. Here is what I learned in the months that followed. Not from books, not from a course, from living it, from making the decision to find out who I actually was underneath everything I had layered on top of myself, trying to be enough for someone else. High-value men are not high value because of what they have. Not the money, not the status, not the apartment or the car or the way they dress. Those things are visible, yes, but they are symptoms. They are the outside of something that lives much deeper. High-value men are high value because of what they cannot be talked out of. Read that slowly. What they cannot be talked out of. Their direction, their standards, their sense of who they are and where they are going. The things they will not trade, not for comfort, not for approval, not for the temporary relief of keeping someone happy at the cost of keeping themselves whole. That is the core. That is what women feel before they can explain it. That is what creates the kind of attraction that does not fade after 6 months, the kind that deepens the more she knows him, because the more she knows him, the more she realizes there is still more she has not reached. A man like that is not a mirror. He is an ocean, and you cannot exhaust an ocean. You cannot get to the bottom of it. You cannot look at it one morning and decide you have seen everything it has to offer. That is what she is drawn to, not the surface, the depth. Now I want to talk about something that is going to feel uncomfortable, because here is the pattern I see repeated constantly in men who are genuinely good, genuinely kind, genuinely trying, and it is the pattern that destroys more relationships than cruelty ever could. I call it the slow vanishing. It does not happen overnight. That is what makes it so dangerous. It starts small. You cancel one gym session because she had a hard day and you want to be there. Reasonable. Loving even. Then you start leaving your opinions at the door because she gets quiet when you disagree and you hate the tension. Understandable. You are keeping the peace. Then the business idea you were genuinely excited about gets quietly shelved because the timing does not feel right. And honestly, the relationship needs your energy right now. Logical. Responsible even. Then the friends you used to see every other week become people you text occasionally because your world has reorganized itself entirely around one person. And one day, not dramatically, not with a single defining moment, you look up and realize the man you were when she first met you no longer exists. You traded him away. One reasonable compromise at a time. And the devastating irony, the part that will keep you awake if you let yourself really feel it, is that you made every single one of those trades trying to protect the relationship. You disappeared trying to stay. She felt it happening before you did. That is the part men almost never understand. Women have a sensitivity to a man's sense of self that operates below conscious thought. She cannot always name it. She cannot always explain it to you or to herself. But she feels the moment a man starts shrinking and something in her that was moving toward him begins, quietly, to move away. Not because she is cruel, not because she does not love him, but because the deepest part of her, the part that is not about logic, or lists, or what makes sense on paper, that part is drawn towards strength the way a plant is drawn toward light. Not the performance of strength, not the mask of strength, the real thing, the quiet, unshakable, I know who I am and I will not apologize for it thing. And when a man loses that even gradually, even for beautiful reasons, she loses the thread that was pulling her toward him. She does not always leave immediately. Sometimes she stays for months, sometimes years, trying to feel what she used to feel, reaching for the version of him that made her heart do something she could not explain. But when a man has disappeared into the relationship completely, when he has made her his entire world so thoroughly that she can feel the weight of being someone's everything, she eventually stops reaching and starts looking for the door. So what does the high-value man do differently? What is the actual, practical, lived difference between the man who keeps losing and the man who never does? It is not a technique. It is not a strategy you can copy and paste over a hollow interior. It is a decision. A single, daily, non-negotiable decision that changes how he carries himself, how he speaks, how he walks into a room, how he responds when she tests him and she will test him, not out of cruelty, but out of a deep biological need to know if he is actually who he appears to be. That decision is simply this. He chooses himself first, not selfishly, not callously, not in a way that disregards her needs or dismisses her feelings, but fundamentally, unwaveringly, as the ground floor of everything else. He refuses to disappear. He keeps his direction. He keeps his standards. He keeps the things that make him him, the ambitions, the non-negotiables, the parts of his identity that existed before she arrived and will continue after any relationship ends. He stays whole. And a whole man, a genuinely, completely, unself-consciously whole man, is one of the rarest things a woman will ever encounter. Which is exactly why she cannot stop thinking about him. But here is what nobody warns you about when you decide to become that man. The process of getting there is going to ask something of you that feels deeply counterintuitive. It is going to ask you to sit in discomfort without reaching for her approval to make it go away. It is going to ask you to hold your position when she pushes back, not aggressively, not coldly, but firmly, like a man who knows the difference between listening and surrendering. It is going to ask you to be someone whose sense of okayness does not live inside her response time. And in the beginning, before it becomes natural, before it becomes who you are rather than what you are practicing, that is going to feel like the hardest thing you have ever done. I know because I lived it. And what happened on the other side of it, what changed in every area of my life, not just relationships, is something I could not have imagined from where I was sitting in that dark car outside my own apartment. But before I tell you what the other side looks like, I need to tell you about the moment everything finally broke open. The moment I stopped performing and started becoming, because that moment did not look the way I expected it to. It did not feel like strength. It felt like grief. This is the part most men skip, and it is exactly why they keep repeating the same cycle. If this is hitting close to home, share this with someone who needs it tonight. And tell me in the comments, where are you in this right now? Still in the dark car? Already rebuilding? I want to know. I want to tell you about a Tuesday morning in November. Nothing dramatic happened that day. No revelation arrived with fanfare. No mentor appeared with perfectly timed wisdom. It was just an ordinary morning grey sky, cold floor, the kind of quiet that sits in an apartment that used to have 2 people in it and now only has 1. I had been going through the motions for about 3 months by then. Waking up, working, eating, sleeping, waking up again, not living, just cycling. The way a machine runs when nobody has turned it off but nobody is actually using it either. And that Tuesday morning, for no reason I could identify then and still cannot fully explain now, I sat down on the edge of my bed and I did not reach for my phone. I just sat there, in the silence, and something cracked open. Not dramatically, not with tears or shouting or the kind of breakdown that looks cathartic in films. It was quieter than that, more honest than that. It was the moment I finally stopped arguing with the truth. The truth that I had been out running for 3 months, keeping myself busy enough, distracted enough, productive enough that it could never quite catch me, finally sat down beside me on that bed and said, quietly, without cruelty, "You lost yourself long before you lost her." And I knew it was true. Not because the relationship had taken something from me, but because I had been handing pieces of myself away for so long, so willingly, so convinced it was what love required, that by the time she left, there was not enough of me remaining to even properly grieve. I was not grieving her. I was grieving him. The man I had been before, I made someone else's comfort the measure of my worth. And that grief, that specific, particular grief of mourning a version of yourself you allowed to disappear, is something most men never name. They call it heartbreak. They call it missing her. They medicate it with new women or new distractions or the same old patterns wearing different clothes. But underneath all of it, if you are honest, really honest, the way you can only be at 5 a.m. or on a Tuesday morning in November when the silence has finally won, it is not her you are missing. It is you. I want to stop here and speak directly to someone. Not everyone watching. Not the general audience. You. The one who has been nodding since chapter 1 but has not admitted yet. Not out loud. Not even to yourself how much of this is about something that happened recently. Something that is still raw. Something you are still carrying in the part of yourself you do not show people. I see you. And I want to say something that nobody said to me when I needed it most. When I was sitting on that bed on that Tuesday morning with nothing left to perform for. You are not broken. You are not too much. You are not too little. You are not fundamentally flawed in some way that makes lasting love impossible for you. You were taught the wrong things. By people who meant well. By a culture that handed you a version of love that looked like sacrifice and called it devotion. That told you the man who gives the most wins. That convinced you that shrinking yourself was the same thing as being selfless. You followed the instructions you were given. The instructions were wrong, and that is not your fault. But what happens next, that part is yours. Because here is where the story changes. Not with a grand gesture, not with a dramatic turning point that makes sense in retrospect as the obvious moment everything shifted. With a decision, the quietest, most unglamorous, most underestimated decision a man can make, I decided to find out who I was without needing anyone to confirm it. Not who I was in a relationship, not who I was when someone was watching, not who I was at my best or my worst or the version of me I had curated across years of trying to be lovable. Who I was, actually, underneath all of it. So I went back to the work I had abandoned, a project I had shelved 18 months earlier because the timing had felt wrong. I did not go back to it because I thought it would make me attractive. I went back to it because it was mine, because somewhere in the part of me that had not completely disappeared, I could still feel the pull of it. That pull was the thread. I followed it. I started waking up an hour earlier not to be disciplined, not to perform some optimized morning routine I had seen online, but because the early morning was the only time of day that belonged entirely to me. Before the world had opinions, before anyone needed anything, before I could be pulled in a direction that was not my own. In that hour I started to remember things. What I actually thought about things, not what was safe to think, not what kept conversations comfortable, but what I genuinely believed when I was not editing myself for an audience. What I actually wanted from my life, not the modified, relationship-compatible version of my ambitions, but the real ones. The ones that felt almost embarrassing to want because they were so specifically mine. What kind of man I had always intended to become before I got distracted trying to become whatever she needed. And slowly, not quickly, not in a montage, but slowly the way real things changed the man I had buried started coming back. Here is what nobody tells you about that process. It is lonely at first. When you stop outsourcing your sense of okayness to someone else, when you take back the responsibility for your own emotional state, there is a period where it just feels like loss. Because you are removing the one thing that had been making you feel temporarily okay, even if it was also slowly destroying you. It feels like withdrawal. And in that withdrawal, every instinct you have will tell you to reach out, to text her, to find someone new to fill the space, to do anything that stops the quiet from being so loud. Do not. Sit in it. Because on the other side of that silence, past the discomfort, past the loneliness, past the part where you are convinced nothing is working, something begins to happen that I cannot fully describe but will try. You start to become someone you trust. Not someone impressive, not someone with the right answers or the perfect story or the enviable life that photographs well. Someone you trust, a man who does what he says he will do, not for her, not for anyone watching, but because his word to himself means something. A man who makes a decision and does not immediately check to see if someone approves of it. A man who walks into a room and does not immediately calculate how he is being perceived. A man who is simply, solidly, unremarkably present in his own life. And the extraordinary thing, the thing that still quietly astonishes me when I think about it, is what happens to the world around you when you become that man. People respond to you differently. Not because you have changed your clothes or learned better conversation techniques or started going to a better gym. Because something in the way you carry yourself has shifted, and human beings, at a level beneath conscious thought, register that shift immediately. Women especially. Women who would have previously seen through you, not cruelly, just accurately begin to slow down, begin to pay attention, begin to feel something they cannot immediately name but cannot quite dismiss either. Because they are feeling the thing that no strategy can manufacture and no performance can sustain. They are feeling a man who is at home in himself. And a man who is at home in himself is so rare, so genuinely, unexpectedly rare, that when a woman encounters one, something in her recognizes it the way you recognize a song you have not heard in years. Something in her says there, that. But here is the part that will surprise you most. The women were not actually the most significant change. The most significant change was internal, private. Something that happened in the space between who I had been and who I was becoming in the quiet of early mornings and honest mirrors and decisions made without an audience. I stopped being afraid of losing. Not because I became cold, not because I stopped caring, but because I had rebuilt myself on a foundation that did not depend on anyone else's presence to remain standing. And when you stop being afraid of losing, when the loss of a relationship, as painful as it is, can no longer take the ground from beneath your feet, something happens to the way you move through the world. You become dangerous. Not to women, not to relationships, to mediocrity, to the version of yourself that was willing to disappear for someone else's comfort, to the life you had accepted because you were too afraid of being alone to demand the life you actually wanted. That man, the one standing on solid ground, unafraid, that is the man I'm going to tell you how to become. Not through a list of rules, not through tactics or scripts or calculated distance, through something much simpler and much harder than any of that. And it starts with one question. The same question I asked myself in that bathroom mirror at 5 a.m. The question that, if you answer it honestly, more honestly than you have answered anything in a long time, will begin to change everything. I will ask you that question in the final chapter, and I promise you the answer is already inside you. You just have to be willing to stop running from it long enough to hear it. Before we go to the final chapter, I need you to do something. Right now, in the comments, I want you to write one word. Just one word that describes how you feel after everything we have covered so far. One word. I will be reading every single one. And if this is speaking to something real in you, share it with one man in your life who needs to hear it tonight. Not tomorrow, tonight. He might be carrying this alone. Here is the question. Not dressed up, not preceded by a long build-up. Just the question, plain and honest, the way I asked it to myself in that bathroom mirror at 5 a.m, on a morning when I had nothing left to perform for. If she never came back, if no woman ever confirmed your worth again, who would you be? And would that man be enough? Sit with that. Do not answer it quickly. Do not reach for the comfortable response. Let it land where it actually lands, not where you wish it would. Because the quality of your honest answer to that question is the exact distance between where you are right now and the man you are capable of becoming. High-value men are not born. They are not lucky. They are not naturally confident in some way that was simply unavailable to you. They are not operating with advantages you do not have access to. They made a decision. The same decision. Over and over. Every morning, in small ways and large ones, in moments nobody witnessed and choices nobody applauded. They decided that their wholeness was non-negotiable. Not their perfection. Not their status. Not their highlight reel. Their wholeness. The decision to remain fully themselves in relationships. Under pressure, when love made shrinking feel like the kind thing to do, that decision is what separates the man who keeps losing from the man who never does. And that decision is available to you, right now, today. So here is what I want you to actually do. Not think about doing. Do. First, get brutally honest about where you disappeared. Sit down tonight, alone, no distractions, and ask yourself, what did I stop doing? Stop wanting. Stop being in the name of keeping someone comfortable. Write it down. Name every trade you made, not to punish yourself. To see clearly, you cannot rebuild what you cannot locate. Second, reclaim one thing this week. Just one. The gym session you stopped going to, the project you shelved, the opinion you stopped voicing, the friend you stopped seeing. Pick one thing that belonged to you before the relationship rewrote your priorities and take it back. Not dramatically, just quietly, firmly, as a man who is done negotiating with his own identity. Third, stop making her the measure of your progress. Whether she comes back or not is not the point. Whether the next woman notices the change is not the point. The point is the man you are building in private, the one who exists whether anyone is watching or not. That man is the foundation. Everything else, the relationship, the attraction, the life you actually want, is built on top of him. Get the foundation right first. Fourth, hold your standard like it costs something. Because it does. Becoming a high-value man is not comfortable. It requires you to disappoint people occasionally, to say no when yes would have been easier, to walk away from things that feel good in the short term but cost you yourself in the long term. That discomfort is not a sign you are doing it wrong. It is a sign you are finally doing it right. Fifth, trust the process even when it feels invisible. The most important changes happen in the silence. In the early mornings nobody sees. In the decisions you make when you are tired and it would be so easy to revert, you will not see the results immediately. But she will feel them before you do. The world will feel them before you do. Stay with it anyway. Here is what I want to leave you with. The man who never loses is not the man who is never left. People leave. Relationships end. Loss is part of being alive and being human, and being someone who is brave enough to love in the first place. The man who never loses is the man who cannot be emptied by loss. The man who grieves fully, honestly, without performing strength and then gets back up. Not because he is not affected, but because his foundation is not built on whether she stays. It is built on who he is when she is gone. That man is available to you. He is not far away. He is not locked behind years of therapy or the right circumstances or a different past. He is underneath everything you layered on top of him, trying to be enough for someone else. Start removing the layers. One morning at a time. One honest decision at a time. One non-negotiable at a time. And one day, not the day you expect. Not with the fanfare you imagined, you will catch your own reflection somewhere and recognize the man looking back at you. And you will know that man does not lose, because that man cannot be taken from himself. That is the whole secret. That is what high-value men know. And now, so do you. If this series changed something in you, if even one chapter cracked something open that needed cracking, hit that like button right now. Not for the algorithm. For every man still sitting in that dark car outside his own apartment wondering what he did wrong, your like puts this in front of him. Subscribe if you want more of this real conversations. No performance, no tactics, just truth. And share this with one man tonight. Your brother, your friend. The one who has been quietly carrying something heavy and has not told anyone. Be the reason he finds this. I will see you in the next one.